So I heard the other room has Nolan Bushnell and Brent Bushnell speaking. One is the founder of the gaming industry. The other is the owner of the venue. So I feel like in this battle of hero against boss, we're kind of on the losing side. But we are going to help you understand the kids market, which I think is extremely important in this day and age. And it's kind of a weird panel for me. I've done more than 100 conference sessions and panels, and this is the first time I'm actually interviewing a colleague of mine, Jesse. We work in the same company about gaming. Yep. So it's a new experience for me, for sure. And before we start, I want to introduce Interpret briefly. We are a market research and consulting agency based here in LA. And we do a lot of gaming research around the world. I've been to 13 countries talking to gamers. Every year I talk to thousands of gamers on in-person basis, and we've surveyed more than probably 300,000–400,000 gamers around the world over the years. And Jesse, you want to say something about yourself?
Yeah, I guess for myself, yeah, I've been in games my entire life. I think it's almost 20 years, even though I'm pretty young.
Yep.
And yeah, I recently just joined Interpret with Michael, a great organization. I'm glad to be part of it. And you know, let's get started. Let's talk about kids.
Sounds good.
Games.
Let's talk about kids. And so I've known you for more than 13, 14 years.
Yeah, I know.
And I know you always kind of focused more on the hardcore gaming audience, the 18 to 34, shooters, RPGs, whatnot. But I also know in recent years you started focusing a little bit more on the more casual audience through mobile gaming as well, the female gamers. But why kids? Why are you interested in talking about kids here?
Because deep down I am one. I am a kid. And what I love about the kids industry so much is they are the future. They are the future. And believe it or not, they shape our industry incredibly well. And I say that because when I grew up, you know, I grew up with games like Quake, Counter-Strike, Team Fortress, and those are the types of games. There were mods really at the time, Quake World was, and it shaped, it really created esports and what esports was today. And we didn't even know what it was back then. And when I look at the kids market today and what they're doing and the influence that they have, it's just incredible because we'll talk about it some more, but we all know the big craze of Battle Royale and Fortnite and Apex. Well, guess what? That was actually originally a Minecraft mod that was created by this kids community. And the other reason why I love the kids community is because their characteristics really don't change over time. Every generation kind of has their kind of staple characteristics of who they are. And with kids, and as they grow older, those characteristics are going to stay the same. So they are going to shape the way in which we make games and the way we market games because it all is ultimately based on consumer demand.
Yeah, you brought up a really interesting point. I mean, I was showing my daughter Fortnite when it came out, and she was like, oh, I played this in Minecraft. So it was definitely kind of the original mode for Battle Royale came out of Minecraft, right? Now, you talked about different generations of kids. What are some of the common characteristics kids share when it comes to gaming, and then what's different about this generation?
So with this generation, I guess we call it Generation Z, we notice that they are much more inclusive. They want cooperative gaming. When we grew up, we were mostly used to competitive gaming, playing against each other. Now, people want to play with each other against other people. They want to create, they want to explore, and of course we see that with Minecraft and Fortnite and Roblox, and that's a very unique characteristic, one that's driven by, one, this generation, but two, technology. I mean, when we were kids, the idea of co-op just didn't exist. We were lucky to even have a second controller with our Nintendo, and now, because of technologies in the back end, we can create these massive universes. So games themselves are shaping the way this generation is going forward. And I put some graphs up here for people online to see, but what we do see when we ask kids, what type of multiplayer games do they like to play? And more often than not, they actually prefer multiplayer modes that are very cooperative, right? And not necessarily competitive.
Yeah, so that social experience is one thing. What else? What else is different about kids when it comes to the need states of gaming?
Yeah, definitely, like I mentioned, exploration, being able to create things. But one thing that's really unique, and you know, I'm a millennial, so it's the generation us, you know, taking selfies and posting them on Instagram. One thing I notice about the kids' generation is they prefer to express themselves digitally. And Instagram is actually one of the biggest outlets and channels they do, and that's something that is very unique because, yeah, for us it's all about selfies, but for them they're taking pictures of their Fortnite characters or their Minecraft characters or the worlds that they're creating in these universes.
And the data you have here shows that creating things, exploration, those are quite important, and that's apparently why Minecraft took off, right? Because it enables you to do those. And then I also see playing with my parents and improving at something. That's probably fairly unique about kids as well, right?
It is very much unique. I mean, when we grew up, the idea of playing games with our parents was unheard of. But now with this generation, because a lot of the parents are millennials, they're used to playing games, and they want to play games with their kids, and the kids actually do want to play games with their parents as well.
Mm-hmm. And then collecting things. So sounds like instead of collecting like My Little Pony or those little plastic toys, now they're shifting their collection to virtual.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I mean that's exactly what we're seeing with the emojicons and the dances, and of course the customization of the characters that we see in a lot of these open world games like Minecraft and Battle Royale. So their collection is very much a digital collection now, more so than a physical collection.
So it's not lost on me that learning new things is actually on the bottom of the chart.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we continue to explore more and dig deeper when we do talk to children, but they feel like like all of us, we feel like we already know everything. So the idea of learning new things, it's tough to teach something to a generation that is natively just born into the gaming industry. So it's not necessary from an educational aspect. I wouldn't look at it like that.
But, I mean, a key takeaway for me is if you're really trying to market your games, edutainment really doesn't work. If the kids can see through that you're trying to teach them something very obviously from the games, then they probably turn off their brain and go somewhere else.
I think we'll talk about that in a bit, because we know that parents, that's a big important factor, this idea of education and edutainment. And yeah, it's not as important if you ask the kids directly, but there is a kind of a little bit of a balance, because we know it's important for parents.
And speaking of the parents, again, they play with their parents, so parents actually play a fairly significant role in kids gaming. It's not one market we're trying to market to.
No, I mean, what's so interesting about the kid market, and we're talking about the sub-13-year-old market, is parents now more than ever, because of this generation, one of the characteristics of this generation is that parents are actually more protective of their children than any other generation prior. And within the study, we have this graph here that actually shows, when we ask parents, that 91% of kids actually have to ask for permission before making an in-app purchase in a mobile game. And that's incredibly high. And that number is actually even higher because there are circumstances where kids don't have to ask for permission. They just have an allowance. They simply just give their dad or mom or their guardian, $5 from their allowance and say, hey, I'm going to go buy some V-Bucks. So parents are very much involved, more so than any other place. And it creates this dual customer base, which doesn't exist in any other segmentation. Not only do we have to win over the kids to make them think that this game is fun and they want to play it, but we also have to win over the parents too, because ultimately if the parents don't agree and if the game doesn't represent the values that they want to project onto their kids, then the parents will not let them play.
I'm a little offended by the title, though. In my household, it's Better Ask Dad.
Okay, well.
Maybe it's because I work in the industry, but I know what my daughters play a lot more than my wife does. And you're right. My daughter, she's not asking for anything on her birthdays these days. All she asks for is Robux, because my younger daughter actually plays a lot of Roblox. But in the old days, when GameStop was kind of the destination for gaming, I felt like the parents actually had a bigger influence on kids. Would you agree? Because I remember we were doing a lot of shopper insight studies. We were actually talking to kids and parents coming out of GameStop. Typically, it's the nagging factor from the kids that actually drive the parents buy those games. What about these days as we kind of shift further into digital? How did that change?
So it changes a lot, because as we know, kids and anyone under the age of 16, they don't have $60 regularly to spend. So they have to nag their parents, as you say, for birthdays or Easter or Christmas or Hanukkah, whatever holiday it may be. But when we switch to this games as a service and these live services models that have worked perfectly for the younger audience, they don't have to ask for $60. They just have to say, hey, Mom, Dad, can I have $5 to buy whatever it may be? That could be the Robux or the V-Bucks or whatever it may be. A lot of times it's just an iTunes or a Google gift card. And believe it or not, so kids on average the parents spend $500 a year on kids on video game products. And it's not done all at once. It's not done $60 at a time. It's done at $5 to $10 at a time, which is much more digestible from a parent's perspective.
Yeah, I'm very encouraged by the 91% here, because for a while, I was trying to advocate in the industry that we shouldn't have any baby whales in the free-to-play gaming industry. Yeah. I mean, if you want to monetize big whales who are adults who know what they're doing, that's one thing, but trying to actually get a lot of money from the kids who know less about how this works, that's just not very ethical. But 91% actually ask their parents before they spend money.
You can't stop the 1%. I mean, we hear the stories in the news all the time. Kid gets a hold of a credit card and spends a couple of $1,000s. Yes, it's wrong, and we do have regulations and policies in place on the platforms, but you can't stop it all. So I actually think this number, this 91%, is actually very encouraging, and I think very reflective of both how good of a job parents are doing nowadays, but how they're educating their kids on how to spend money.
And looking at how they spend money on character customization, that makes a lot of sense. They want to look good, right? Yep. And also a lot of those are sold in packages these days. So you can spend like $10 and you get a bunch of stuff. But to protect a kingdom or city, I mean, that can be a slippery slope.
Yeah, because you don't really, when you're obviously purchasing customization, it's something you can keep with your character forever, whereas, protecting a kingdom or city like in Clash of Clans, you buy a shield, and a lot of the other type of city builders out there, it disappears over time. And so we find that the younger audience just doesn't tend to prefer that. They want something that it's not tangible. Of course, it's intangible, but they believe like it's theirs forever.
That's good to hear. Yeah. Now, so far we've been talking about kids as one group, but I believe within kids we have a lot of different segments as well.
Yes, definitely. And the one that is growing, it's really exploding, is actually the female market. So the kid female market, girls under 12, between 3 and 12, is the fastest growing segment, not just within the kids, but within all demographics, all segments that you can think of. Any way you break it down, the young female audience is growing the fastest, and it's mostly because they are now growing up in they're game natives. I mean, that's all they know are games. They're almost born with an iPad or an iPhone in their hands. Another reason for it is that what we're finding with this generation is they are very inclusive. So we are seeing that, primarily, yes, boys are the ones that have been known to be the ones that drive the games industry. But now what we're seeing is boys are inviting girls. We see a lot of game nights that happens at parents' house where it's both girls and boys playing together in the same room, and girls want to play. And they want to be a part of this. I mean, right now, the demographic for a game like Fortnite, just so people know, over 35% of the people that play Fortnite are females. And that is definitely mostly a younger audience. And it's very similar for Brawl Stars. And why this is important is, as I mentioned before, this is not going to change, right? When we think about hardcore games now, Dota and League of Legends and Counter-Strike and Overwatch, we're talking about an 80-20% split with male-female. There's no doubt in my mind that 10 years from now, we're going to see what we consider hardcore games of tomorrow. It's going to be close to parity. It's going to be close to a 50% split.
That'll be very encouraging, because even like 5 years from now, whenever we do focus groups for a lot of our gaming clients, when we mention why not having a few female players in the focus groups, they were like, nah, our games don't sell to girls. And then eventually, they started realizing the importance, not only the females, they do play games, but the female gamers are actually smarter and a lot more articulate when they actually come to the focus groups. And also, the presence of those females kind of encourage the guys to be smarter as well. So even from a research perspective, we're seeing that kind of shifting as well. And also, if you look at Asia, a lot of the games in Asia, especially the multiplayer games, they have a much healthier male-female ratio. A lot of them are like 60-40%, and that's why those games are much bigger in Asia than here. And then you also mentioned the female, the girls. My daughter actually went through that evolution herself, because my older one is 14 now, and she started playing Minecraft when she was 9. And initially, she was all about building and creation, and then after a year, she started playing the Hunger Game mode with her male classmates, and that's how she started getting into a different genre within Minecraft. And then suddenly, a year ago, she stopped playing Minecraft. I was like, what happened? She's like, all my guy friends from school are playing this new game called Fortnite now. So for like 9 months, they only do like a game night once a month where her old friends from Minecraft will get together and they will play. And then suddenly, over the last 2 months, she's starting playing again on her phone, Brawl Stars, because a lot of her guy friends from school are now playing Brawl Stars, and they were inviting her back to socialize with them. So that thing was definitely reflected in my daughter as like.
Yeah. What's actually really interesting, and this is hot off the presses, this was just released just like a couple hours ago. They did a study of a couple million Dota players, and they found that females actually progress faster in terms of experience in Dota 2 than any other category.
Yeah.
It was actually very impressive. You know what the least, who progressed the slowest?
I haven't seen that.
Married men.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Thank you.
I don't know why. But it's a really good study that was just released, and there's a lot of details on it. But continue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the female gamers, when we talk to them in focus groups, they're also a lot more humble. I mean, I don't want to offend the guys here, but we've had gamers in China who play League of Legends and who are platinum, and they were like, yeah, we don't play very well. And then if you kind of look at their stats, none of the guy gamers in the room actually can match. Yeah. So a lot of the kids games like Roblox and including Minecraft, they went viral fairly quickly because even like Fortnite, like when Fortnite came out, a big reason why it exploded was the teenagers, the middle school, the high schoolers who talk about Fortnite and these games at school, on playground. So that person, in real life, viral factor is important. What are the other ways for the gamers or the gamer kids to communicate with each other?
So yeah, it's still very much standard and true. It's a playground. It is the playground. Kids communicate on the playground. They schedule times when they're going to meet at night. Other ones is actually Instagram. And I know that you're supposed to be 13 or older to get an Instagram account, but the more kids that we speak to in research and study with their parents, they all have Instagram accounts, right? And it's very impressive the way. And the other one is WeChat. So because of the technology that's out there, there's so many different ways. There's obviously the online forums. They have official forums like through Roblox. Minecraft has a lot of different forums. But the communication that happens between kids is much stronger and much more pervasive, like I say, prevalent than I've ever seen before. They find a way, even though sometimes they're not allowed to because of the policies. But yeah, Instagram, I'm just so impressed about how kids, especially between ages of 10 and 13, use that as a platform to organize and come together. The other thing, and we didn't have this growing up, I mean, when I was playing Quake and Counter-Strike and Team Fortress before we knew what esports was, to organize clan matches and guilds, like we had to use third-party softwares like MRC and ICQ, and now because of the way technology is and we have such strong back end, we have clan systems that are right inside the game. We have friend lists that are right inside the game. So it's very easy for kids to kind of congregate together because the information is right there. It's so instantly readily available. Just click and you start playing with one of your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost all the popular multiplayer games have their in-game clans, in-game channels. And for the well-behaved kids, they typically stay with their friends and don't really invite any strangers into those groups.
That is true.
Yeah,
very much.
And also, sounds like Google, like a lot of the Google communication platforms like Chats and Hangout, a lot of the kids actually use those to communicate.
They do that, yes.
Yeah,
well.
which is very interesting. So, I mean, we've been doing a lot of kids research, both qualitatively and quantitatively. The report you were mentioning here actually came out of a study we've been doing for the last 7 years called GamesBeat Kids. However, most of the companies who actually have commissioned the custom research or the purchased the report actually came outside of the gaming industry, like toy industries, TV media, technology. Not a lot of the traditional gaming companies actually purchase game research, even though I am going to China in 2 weeks to do a study with kids for one of the major publishers. But overall, why aren't the game publishers themselves doing more research on kids? I mean, even Phil mentioned earlier when he was doing his speech about Stadia, the kids are shaping the industry. Why aren't they studying the kids?
I think this is a situation where the current laws are not meeting with reality. And that's just been true. Government's always been slow to really catch up with technology. And we have COPA, in Europe we have the GDPR, and it terrifies us because the way the COPA is worded is if you openly admit that you're targeting kids under 13, then you have to be entirely COPA compliant, right? And that scares people. And I spent 4 or 5 years on the development side, and I can tell you that I've worked for a studio where our legal team has said, do not buy any research if your kids are for kids under 13. But half of our audience is under 13. Do not buy it. And the reason why is because they're afraid. And the reality is, it is very idiotic because we need to understand this market, and you shouldn't be afraid to do research on what is 1/4 of the industry's revenue, and for some of us, it's half of the industry's revenue. So just because you buy research to try to understand this dual customer base that is incredibly important doesn't mean that you're targeting kids. You're just trying to understand. And I think that's a lot of the problems that we do run into with some publishers is that they're just afraid. They know, look, kids play all of our games. Whether they should or not, they do, and I think it's our responsibility to at least learn a little bit more about them so that we can shape our games better, right? And really make not only just our industry better, but ourselves better as well by tailoring some of our features and how we market these games to our audiences.
Well, I hope you guys learned some interesting facts and data and insights about kids today.
Yes, and
anything else you want to share?
I do, because I love this stuff, and so we do this report, and you know, anyone that knows me here, because I do a lot of speeches, I don't like to sell on stage, so we do have this GamesBeat mini report that's really mobile focused that we typically were selling for $6,000. But we talked right upstairs, and we came up with a really good idea, and we talked to Dean, which was, if you just mention GamesBeat, we'll sell it for $4,000, and then we're going to donate $1,000 to either Child's Play or Girls Who Code, which are two fabulous foundations. So we'll leave that on the table, and thank you, everyone. I really do appreciate it. I think we don't have any time for questions because I know we're over, and there's still
we can entertain
in the back here.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.